Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining the Mentors. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host, Gabe. Obviously, we have watched with horror the events unfolding in Israel. We are, along with everybody else, captivated by that and incredibly saddened. And our hearts go out to everybody in Israel who has been a victim of that. We wanted to have an episode this week and talk about those things. Obviously, sports is a great form of relief for a lot of people. And we recognize that, but we also want to talk about the actual responses that have come from the various organizations, sports teams, and individuals who make the games great. So we were joined this week by Keene of the Forward. He has been doing a pretty good job cataloging the responses from Jewish athletes online. We talked about the responses from different people, the nature of what these responses are, and what they attempt to do. So let's jump right in. Well, we're joined tonight by Keene of the Forward. Lewis, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, good to be here.
Obviously, a difficult time for everybody, and I can only imagine for anyone working in Jewish media, this has been a pretty busy week, busy weekend, and coming off the holidays especially. But your remit at the Forward has always been sports, or at least sports is a big chunk of what you've been doing. And we saw the other day that you posted a thread on Twitter of compiling all the Jewish professional athletes that had made a comment on the terrorist attack in Israel. So what got you interested in that, or what made you want to compile those messages?
Initially, it was because I saw, I think, what Dean Kramer and what Denny Avdia wrote, and I know we put a lot of stock into what professional athletes say about things that are happening in the world, and I know my followers are generally interested in finding out what athletes of Jewish heritage or Israeli heritage are saying or doing at any given time. So I thought it would be a good way to compile them all in one place. I did think that what they were saying was interesting, especially Denny, who's been reluctant to go in depth on Israeli stuff when it's come up in the past. I know, for example, when Kyrie Irving got in trouble for tweeting
being an anti-Semite. It's okay.
Yeah, when he was opining, when Kyrie Irving was opining on who runs the world.
For tweeting a simple Amazon Prime link.
Right.
Denny did not want to, assail him publicly. I think he didn't see it sort of as his place in the NBA hierarchy on a certain level. He's still very much finding his footing in the league. But here he wrote, 2 paragraphs going into a really
in
important
Hebrew
season.
and in English, we should say. So
yeah, he wrote an Instagram post in Hebrew and shared a translation of what he wrote also, in which he said, the haunting images from Gaza are hard to shake off. I'm committed to shedding light on this dark chapter, and my thoughts are with everyone affected. He also said that knowing some victims personally adds another layer to my heartache, signaling that he's personally affected by this, not just because everyone in Israel or everyone Jewish kind of knows someone who knows someone. He is that person who knows someone and has people affected. So we don't know much more about that yet. But I do think we've seen sort of the consequence of having Jewish professional athletes, which is their teammates are also speaking up, which is kind of new for me to see. I know a number of Baltimore Orioles teammates of Dean Kramer shared the MLB statement, and even Kyle Kuzma, can kind of be a wild card when it comes to sharing political ideas online. He said himself, like, my thoughts are with Israel, and Kyle Kuzma is Denny Avdia's teammate. So
right. And I think Dean Kramer had said, a lot of people on his team had reached out to him. A lot of his teammates had talked to him about it.
He says he thinks every single one did, is actually what he said, which is really
nice to hear. I mean,
wonderful.
This has been a rare situation where I don't want to say there's, a universal feeling of support necessarily, but certainly a fairly consistent feeling of support for Israel and for Jewish people who have been affected by this as well. I think it's an interesting thing to compile the all these statements. It's unsurprising that all these Jewish athletes have been doing it, and it's interesting to see that non-Jewish athletes have been supporting that as well. And I think we've seen it pretty much from every team, certainly in the major North American major sports, and every league has put out a statement. I mean, it's a sort of fascinating time because I think everyone has that. A lot of people have a feeling of like, well, I need to say something, I need to comment, I need to put my voice out there, and having a difficulty, first of all, saying anything that adds anything, and also that gets anything through. When people are speaking sort of extemporaneously or more honestly about their feelings, I think it leads to more interesting sentiment, if not necessarily the most polished or complete sentiments sometimes.
Totally. I want to point out, for listeners in Canada, and Lewis, just for a little context for you, all of the Toronto sports teams are owned pretty much primarily by a guy named Larry Tannenbaum, who is, a very wealthy man. He is a very big benefactor. The largest Jewish Hebrew school in Canada is named after his parents. He is a Zionist and a philanthropical guy. And sort of a big titan of the Toronto Jewish community. And it took till today. It happened today that the 4 teams he owns put out a message. And it was 2 sentences that were fairly, I don't want to say mealy-mouthed, but just sort of we are sad to see that people are dying and we hope for peace. And I would recommend not reading the comments on any of those messages, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone here. But at least to me, to James' point, it's interesting to see who chooses to wait and why. And, I don't think necessarily Larry has much say these days in what a social media post on the team puts out. But it's interesting to know what the competing priorities must be for a team that probably has been arguing for 3 days about what to say.
Yeah, they tweeted their sadness over the passing of Brendan Malone which happened today.
Yeah, also happened today.
An hour ago is when those 4 teams posted a shared statement. I'll just read it for the listeners.
Yeah, please.
The death of any innocent person can never be explained, condoned, or excused. MLSE and its teams stand against all forms of hate and with those affected by the heinous acts of terror that occurred in Israel this past weekend. We hope for the day when all people in the region can live in peace.
A bit mealy-mouthed. I guess I would say that reading the Jewish athletes post that you compiled, for the most part, the ones who wrote their own, it was more specifically Jews are being killed here. I stand with Israel. Here is a specific memory or instance of me doing that and having that support. And teams and leagues, I don't know, everybody is trying to sort of PR speak their way through this and condemn violence on all sides that, I don't know, gets people. I understand the inclination of I want to put out a statement that's not going to get me criticized, but nobody does that well. No matter what you say, you're going to be attacked one way or the other. You're never going to please everybody. And you can just do something principled or honest or not. I mean, I think we talked off there about Amari Stoudemire's post. He is a outspoken person and had a post that was very, calling people out. I think so much so that he deleted it.
Yeah, I think, with the MLB and team statements, they kind of want to go down the middle. I don't think they want to stray too far from the beaten path of what the leagues, have carved out. And all of these are negotiated statements, in PR departments. And I'm sure all these PR departments are consulting their PR departments to figure out, what can we say that won't get us ratioed and make us the subject of the conversation, which I think is okay. And I think where they landed has been pretty, not only fast, but I think also generally pretty sensitive to what happened.
The first one I saw of any sort of team statement actually was Saturday afternoon. So it was within, 8 hours of the invasion becoming public. And it was from the Miami Heat, who not only have a Jewish owner, but have a proud Israeli owner, Mickey Arison. And within, I guess it was at 8 p.m. October 7th. So it was in the evening. And it said, the Hamas attack of Israel sparked a day of senseless violence and hundreds of innocent lives lost. The Miami Heat stand with the people of Israel. which I actually think, to your point, this was a much more like strongly worded statement than we're going to see for those who took a longer time.
That's heat culture, I think.
I do think
it is.
like
I'm honest. I genuinely think that is. I think that there's a difference between a city or organization that's like, we've had Jewish Heritage Nights, or we know who Jews are, and like the Columbus Blue Jackets being like, we have to put out a statement here. And it's like, I always find it odd because it's like, you actually don't. Like, I don't know that you need to. It is nice to have support. It's nice to be in that position. But I think there are people for whom silence is, like, you can say nothing and it's not the end of the world, to just be silent on the issue instead of saying something dumb. But I don't know. I understand the incentive, or sorry, the feeling of like wanting to say something constructive or be constructive for the people who are reaching out. And I'm sure every North American sports team has had, Jewish season ticket holders reach out at some point and say, why haven't you put out a statement about this? Or what are you doing about this? And you need to respond somehow.
Yeah, I think the teams concluded that they could not stay silent on this. But also, I mean, looking at the Toronto Raptors statement or the Toronto sports team statement, like, I honestly think it's good that more teams, or wish that more teams spoke about, just innocent lives being lost in general, because I do think that's happening on both sides of the wall. Mm-hmm. And none of the teams, as far as I can tell, have really said anything alluding to the fact that more innocent lives are going to be lost in coming days and weeks. And Absolutely. That we also don't want that. And we also are thinking about that. And they didn't go as far as to say the word Gaza or sympathizing with Gaza, which I think might have been inflammatory for a lot of people. But I think they did try to strike a balance here that that acknowledge that any innocent life lost is a tragedy and is worth condemning.
Absolutely. Something that I don't know if you linked to it in your segment, because I would call it sports, but sports adjacent. But wrestling announcer and legendary New York hip hop DJ Peter Rosenberg made sort of a long video talking about sort of the importance of, it's natural that you're going to care about the lives of the people slightly more, that you identify with slightly more than others. And that's scary and difficult. But the challenge, which is difficult, is to remember that somebody else cares about other people too. Right? It's not, it's natural to feel I'm sad about Israelis, I'm sad about Palestinians, but the best we can do to fight that is to think about the other people who are caring in addition to the other people who are dying, which I thought was a very eloquent way of that sentiment.
Yeah. And I mean, at least with my friends, I think, and sort of my social milieu, I do feel like that's been the prevailing tone or mood or attitude, which makes the people who are like, well, actually, violence is rooted in oppression or whatever, like, it makes it all the more confounding. It's like, my friend posted this earlier today. He's like, all of us live in settler colonial countries and all of us like going to concerts, and like none of us feel that like going to a concert means that you should be able to die at that concert.
We're in Canada. We had Thanksgiving yesterday. Like, if there isn't a bigger celebration of settler colonialism, like, I don't think that exists. Which is like awkward timing, but there's no question that we, there are parts of our lives where we enjoy settler colonialism and celebrate the fruits of it for ourselves. And we know that in other countries, in many places, it's bad. But also, like, we talked about this a lot this summer. I can't help thinking when, during the World Cup, I think it was last fall, when Morocco won their first game, they unfurled the Palestinian flag and cheered for free Palestine, without any mention of their occupation of Western Sahara and so on and so forth. We can get like deep into that if you like. I see Jamie's reacting.
Well, I was just going to say, like, speaking of soccer, I wanted to mention that FIFA really is the glaring exception of sports leagues that it hasn't really said anything. It did put out a statement talking about the fact that Israel's upcoming soccer matches were going to be postponed. And it referenced, quote, the current security situation in Israel. And I should give credit to Rob Harris of Sky News, who has reported on this and has reported on Israel-related football things in the past as well. And that's sort of interesting. I think maybe is reflective of who FIFA's masters are, so to speak. I mean, it is very beholden to the Arab world for funding, and I don't know, it's incredibly corrupt and happy to take money from people who might not want a forceful statement condemning the Hamas attacks in Israel. Maybe that's reading too much into it, but it is sort of amazing that this this global body that actually has to suspend matches because of what's going on is not making a statement directly on the issue. After all, I mean, the Miami Heat they're going to play their games. They're going to play their preseason games and their regular season games unaffected by the attacks. So it's sort of interesting that FIFA's the one big exception here.
So going back to that Amare post, so his story is interesting because he posted a video, I think on Sunday, because he said, I woke up this morning with some disturbing news out of Israel.
The Hamas kidnapping children, putting them in cages, killing women, killing the elderly. That's some coward shit. That's cowardly. And for all y'all Black Lives Matter who ain't saying nothing, well, let me figure out exactly what happened before I say anything. Fuck you. Figure out what? It ain't never been cool to kidnap kids and put them in cages. It ain't never been cool to kill women and elderly. Never been. No matter where you from, what you represent, what tribe you from, it don't matter. There ain't never been no cool. There ain't never been none that nobody supported. And then you go and hide and put the kids in front of you as a barricade. That's some coward shit. All you politicians who always had something to say on the contrary, I see you. Fuck you. All you Black Lives Matter people who always had something to say and always supported everything else and you quiet now, fuck you too.
And then I guess he took down that video some hours later, maybe the next day, and posted a second video saying that he had kind of overheated.
From the time that I spent in Israel, learning Torah, playing my sport, I saw so much progress. I saw Palestinian families going on beautiful walks, watching the sunset, jogging, exercising. I saw beautiful Palestinian children singing, dancing, bowling, interacting with my African-American Jewish children, playing sports. I saw the progress. It was happening. My frustration comes because I want to continue to see that progress. I hope that we come to a ceasefire soon and that we're able to find a resolution for this situation. I pray for the safety of the Palestinian children along with the Israeli children.
But I do think the intersection of BLM on this issue has been pretty revealing. I know, at least with some local chapters in LA and especially in Chicago, which posted stand with Palestine, a picture of a hang glider.
Right.
That has really been shocking. I marched with Black Lives Matter in LA in 2020. Obviously, its origins were in fighting the idea and the actuality of innocent people being shot to death, and adopting as a logo or as a graphic a hang glider, which is not representative of Palestine, but is representative of Hamas. Shocking to me. I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah. And in terms of a lot of the things that people I don't agree with have been saying about that movement for a long time, which I still don't agree with. I still don't believe that the root of that movement is anti-Semitic or that it, undergirds the movement. But whoever posted that is giving all of the skeptics of, a really promising and positive movement a lot of ammunition to prove their point.
Yeah, and we should say Amari did delete it. He felt he was coming in hot and said a more balanced statement saying, I pray for the people of Israel, I pray for Jerusalem, I pray for the people of Palestine, I stand with humanity, addressing Black Lives Matter directly as well. But it is interesting to see the sort of, someone who's not necessarily bridled by any need for restraint, any professional need for restraint. He's not currently playing. He's not a coach. And seeing the passion.
He's just hanging out at yeshiva games.
Yeah. So interesting to see. We're seeing a whole spectrum of things. I don't think we've seen any professional athlete yet make a whole ass of themselves. No one has come out and supported Hamas. I'm sure there's been instances of people being more focused on Palestine or less focused on Israel at the moment than maybe you would like to see or one would like to see. I don't think we've seen it yet. I would say that I'm sure in the next week or so we will see a professional athlete post something that will be decried as anti-Semitic. That's like, that's.
But I think
I would say that's like a negative 200 on
Israel to be in a war
right
for
now.
that to happen.
That's true, but like this especially, like this is going to be a time where like somebody's going to say something incredibly stupid at some point in the next week or two.
Yeah, I mean, my money's always on Kyrie. He did tweet. He did tweet on October 8th, which is when this began. I guess it began the 7th, but tweet on the 8th. God is watching what is happening around the world, which for someone who like thinks of himself as God, I don't know what to make of that post. But he subsequently tweeted yesterday, "My heart mourns for all of the innocent lives lost in the crossfires of war. God never intended for humanity to destroy one another."
Yeah, that's like as good as you can hope for with Kyrie, and I think that's fine. That's fine. It's nothing offensive about that. I think it is like a prayer for peace. That's a totally normal thing. Yes, I would not be shocked if he is the one who says something in the next few days. Although I guess we'll see. Friends of his, I feel like are often sort of towing that line as well. Like there's been a few people who, like Jillian Brown was pretty supportive of him last year, and we'll see if that leads to something. But I guess we'll see. I'm not hoping for it at all. I'm just saying that at some point in the next week or two, some professional athlete's going to say something incredibly anti-Semitic online.
Has Jonathan Isaac said anything yet?
No. Well, I feel like Jonathan Isaac would be very positive because he's like far right Christian.
Yeah, I think he's like not necessarily a Christian Zionist, but like so Christian he's Jewish.
Yeah,
which is something I say that's one of my wife's comments about her fundamentalist Christian cousins. They're so Christian, they're Jewish. Like Christian enough to like keep kosher and like have a Passover Seder.
Yeah,
I think he's there. So maybe he'll say something. I don't know. But I just I feel like his takes aren't particularly thought out or nuanced.
Yeah, I mean, his last post that isn't basketball related was about transgender people. So
yeah,
his most recent, if you think I am saying trans individuals should be affirmed unconditionally, then you've misread.
So I don't mean to laugh, but I also see he's got a post fighting with Charles Barkley for Charles Barkley's support of trans people.
Yeah, I'm not staying tuned on that one.
Anyways, I do want to thank you for joining us tonight, Lewis, and going over some of this. Obviously, this is a challenging time for everybody, but good to have the relief of some sports and also see what athletes are saying and keep an eye on that. So
for sure,
keep an eye on that.
Of the two Jewish athletes who are playing today that we keep track of, we've noticed both Dean Kramer and Alex Bregman wearing very visible Magen Davids. Yeah. Bregman drew one on his hat, and Dean Kramer's got his like hanging out of his jersey tonight. I feel he can't have. I was watching the game before he came on here, mostly to see how the broadcast would treat it. And they unsurprisingly went to man on the field and like proud Jewish man Ken Rosenthal. I feel like having Joe Buck or Chip Carey do this statement would have been like less good.
Right.
But they just had Ken talk about, Kramer being Israeli, being proud Israeli, pitcher for the World Baseball Classic team, and like understandably worried about his brother who is currently in the army. So that's sort of what they talked about, as well as Dean saying, I'm thinking about it no matter what.
Yeah, I will say, as tough of a time as it's been for me, it's been a even tougher time for Jewish pitchers in the MLB postseason.
That's true.
Yes.
Tough game today for Dean Kramer.
4 innings. Dean Kramer knocked out after 5 outs.
Yeah.
And 6 runs. But,
it was,
lovely to see him, proudly wearing the Magen David, and I'm sure he'll be talking about it afterwards. And
to be the first Israeli pitcher to pitch in the postseason.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Quite the achievement. Anyways, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much. Thanks again, Lewis. Everyone can follow Lewis on Twitter. It's at this Lewis, and read your work at The Forward.
Great to be on with you guys. Take care.
Well, thanks again to Lewis Keene for joining us. So first things first, Gabe, you mentioned at the end that there were 2 Jewish baseball players in the MLB playoffs today with varying results, both rocking the Magen Davids. Alex Bregman hit a home run for the Astros today as they look to reach their 7th straight ALCS.
7 straight?
Which,
wow.
I believe he was an ALCS MVP.
Yes.
Maybe not last year, but maybe in 2017. Anyways, but he hit a home run. Pretty impressive. It looks like drew a Magen David on his hat.
Yes, with some sort of chalk, I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen that anyone has asked him about it. That anyone asked him about it after the game or anything like that. But I'm going to guess it was simply, I don't have a chain with me, and
yes,
I wanted to get it on there. So
I wanted to do something. Yeah, I don't like wearing this during games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
and he's throughout the season or throughout his career, like he's relatively down with the culture, as they say.
Yeah.
He appears at Houston bar mitzvahs and has given talks at synagogues and such. Like he's ready to go. He's a Albuquerque, growing up Albuquerque Jew, went to services, big high holiday family dinners. Like he has talked about his bar mitzvah. It's nice to see him get back to the culture, especially when we as a people really need that support.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, that's a pretty conspicuous thing to do. Like, you're usually not allowed to do that. You would get fined. I can't imagine there's any situation where Major League Baseball is going to be fining him. But still impressive to see him do it. And
given his family history of litigating against Major League Baseball, I think it might not be their smartest move.
Yeah, his grandfather was a labor lawyer, I think, right? Who was involved in MLBPA early goings on.
I think they might have moved the Washington Senators to Texas, something like that.
Right. And Dean Kramer, who's the starting pitcher tonight for the Baltimore Orioles, was rocking a Magen David necklace. Unfortunately, it didn't power him the way it powered Alex. He got pretty badly hit today.
Yeah, he didn't have a great day, but he's got a lot to think about.
Yeah, and Dean is an Israeli. Like he's an Israeli American. His brother's in the reserves and is serving. He really has family in Israel who's being directly affected by this. So I can't imagine that helped him. Get ready for the game or anything like that. I'm not blaming it as the source of why he had a bad game or anything like that. But I just can't imagine what it's like to go out there and try to pitch in front of 50,000 people while all that's going on in the background.
It must be brutal. They as we mentioned during the game, there was during the interview, there was one quick mention from Ken Rosenthal, sort of about Kramer's history. I remember Dean Kramer during the Little League World Series game last year. Baltimore was playing and he was pitching, and he mentioned his favorite food was an Israeli delicacy, shawarma, and the broadcasters had no idea what it was. They had to look up what shawarma was while doing the broadcast. So, Kramer's Israeli heritage has come up on television before.
Right. We should say, aside from that, in the MLB playoffs, Max Fried is still around with the Atlanta Braves. They came back and won last night. It's 1-1 in their series against the Phillies. Garrett Stubbs is with the Phillies, so somebody from that bracket.
There will be a Jew in the NLCS.
There will be a Jew in the NLCS, and it's looking like the Bregman-led Astros will make the ALCS. So possibility for a pitcher, a Jewish pitcher pitching to a Jewish hitter. Fried versus Bregman again. Exactly. So that's worth keeping an eye on, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear things from them or see statements or signs of support from them. as they go on in the MLB playoffs.
On the other side, there are no Jews, as I can tell, on the Arizona Diamondbacks. However, they do have a pretty great Mike Jacobs all-star in Kevin Ginkel, Ginkel.
Plus your Jewish father in the stands cheering him on.
Plus my Jewish father in the stands at I think every playoff game they'll play at home.
That's great.
He's already got He's already got NLCS tickets. I think he's planning on scalping DS tickets, just showing up as a single tomorrow and walking in. But he'll be there.
That's great. Just shifting a little bit, we want to say that it is the start of the NHL season tonight. There's a great graphic courtesy of at Jewish Hockey that lists all the Jewish hockey players in the NHL this year, or at least everyone who's more or less going to make a roster or play in the next little while. Gabe, anyone you want to talk about highlight for people going into the season? As
a lot of folks might be surprised to know that he's been the bread man himself, been a star in the league for a long time. Artemi Panarin does have Jewish heritage. He is quite a religious Catholic. Has talked about going to church before every single game to pray to Jesus. That said, we still support, he still fits the rules, the Team Israel rules. So we believe, he's in there, but, we're expecting, on this podcast, at least another huge season from friend of the pod, Zach Hyman. Edmonton is truly a Stanley Cup contender. And it'd be great to see, a Jewish name or a Jewish guy lift up that cup. As well, the two Hughes brothers, Quinn Hughes, we talked about this before, has just been named the captain of the Vancouver Canucks. He's the second captain before
after Jeff Halpern.
Jeff Halpern, yes.
Yeah.
The first one, obviously Jeff, and then now Quinn Hughes, who will hopefully be a captain for longer than Halpern was. Halpern only last one season in those. However, Hughes, he is the cornerstone of the future of the Vancouver Canucks. And I think they're expecting him, at least the Vancouver Jewish community is expecting him to be there for a long time. So we're excited to see him take the next step this year.
I saw as well that his brother Jack is number 2 in jersey sales. In NHL, behind only Connor Bedard, the recent number 1 pick, who is going to be making his debut as we're talking about this. But that's pretty cool. I don't know. I don't know. Like, is New Jersey like a big, like, I know the Devils have fans. I'm just saying, like, have the Devils become a more popular team in New Jersey since the Nets left and like there's less New Jersey identity? Like, is it what's going on there? Because it feels obviously he's a good player, but it seems out of
they play in the Prudential Center, which is in Newark. They are, I guess, part of the New York metropolitan area. And I think if you are a Jewish athlete in New York, you will have a lot of fans all the time.
Oh, good point. Right.
That's a big part of it as well. The Devils have been up and down good for a long time, but they're expected to be bad for a while. And then they sort of took the leap last year, second in their division. Jack Hughes is one of the best players in the league after a couple of years of figuring it out.
He's 20. He's 21 years old. He scored 43 goals last year. Like, that's like, he's a superstar. That's pretty amazing. Like, he's on that trajectory. Do you think 50 goals this year possible?
I think 50 goals is absolutely in the realm of possibility. 100-point season totally in the realm of possibility for Jack Hughes. It depends how good the team plays. I think, if you ask Jack, he'd much rather say, I'd rather win a Stanley Cup. I'm only 21.
Oh, that's what they all say. No, but the Devils are pretty. They're 10-1 odds right now. I think they're 4th or 5th best odds to win.
They're in their division they have aging. They're the next team to come up after pretty seriously aging Vancouver, pretty aging Washington and Pittsburgh. So it's pretty likely that the Devils, if they don't win the league this year, win that division this year, they'll be very, very close. As well, Hughes was at 99 points last year, so he was really, really close to win, matching that 100 points. So with any luck, as fans of him, Jewish, we will be, happy to do it. We'll be happy to celebrate him. In addition, he was an all-star last year. For 2 years in a row. Like, he's really the superstar people thought he was when he was drafted 1st overall. Hopefully his youngest brother, Luke, can be up on the team with him again.
Yeah, that is pretty cool to see two brothers play together. Don't have that many examples of that among Jewish athletes. Seen it a few times in hockey over the years.
Mostly the Howes and the Sutters, the Alous.
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of Jewish brothers, at least in North American sports.
The Schwartzes are the only ones that come to mind. Jeff and Mitchell Schwartz, who are both on the line for Kansas City at various times. They did play together. I think they did overlap for a bit.
And then, in addition, we want to talk about actually currently in a lot of trouble for some of the things he said and did this weekend is Jewish race car driver Lance Stroll, who's one of the first drivers to speak out about, I would say, pretty horrifying conditions at the Qatar Grand Prix last week. For the uninformed, the race takes place in Qatar, which is not, as we said, traditionally a friendly country to a lot of people complaining about physical and mental torture.
Right.
But, the race was 50 degrees Celsius when the race happened, and apparently closer to 70 or 80 degrees sitting inside a 300 mile an hour speed machine. And Lance, who passed out walking out of the car onto the way, was in trouble for shoving his trainer when his trainer tried to come help him. But, in Lance's own words, he was confused. It was difficult, said he couldn't see, said he actually passed out while driving the car during the race, which is incredibly dangerous and could have easily killed him. Even though he had a rough week and is in trouble, I just want to say good for Lance for being one of the drivers to speak up about it and about the conditions, because, it's not a lot of athletes, I think, will take that experience as part of doing the game, but Lance is actually worried about driver safety and trying to make it better for everybody.
Interesting. Well, it's an interesting story to keep an eye on, and I don't know what they do about that. I mean, if you're going to have a race there, then it sounds like the conditions are probably going to be terrible. I mean, it's October. Like, we saw it happen with the World Cup and moving, and it didn't make a huge difference. I guess they'll just have to go at end of January, December, and
they do the race at night, it's cooler.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
but it's still Qatar now. It's still incredibly hot.
Mm-hmm.
I look at this is 3 days later, and in any race, even if it's not so hot, when you're on the track and all those cars are driving, like the engines burn at 1,000 degrees. So when you're sitting right next to it, there's all this work to cool the driver down. But when it's that hot, you're past the wet bulb for places like that.
Right.
So being so sweaty. 3 or 4 drivers dropped out of the race because it was too hot.
Wow.
One of them threw up inside their own helmet. It was not a good scene.
Well, why don't we leave it there for this edition of Benchwarmers? As always, you can find our posts on the Canadian Jewish News website, the cjn.ca, and good to check in on there. You're not necessarily seeing Canadian Jewish News links on social media right now because if you're in Canada, at least because of the rules related to posting news on social media or the way the social media companies have limited that. And we're produced by Michael Freeman, and you can find our content on Twitter as well at Benchwarmers. See you next time.